Landlords across the U.S. are crying foul after more states, cities, and municipalities are passing laws that make it illegal for them to see eviction records. I'm going to tell you why that's a problem and what needs to happen in order to make sure that landlords get the best tenants possible. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over a topic that I have covered several times before, and it's the whole thing where these states and these cities, they're trying to make it so that landlords can't see eviction records. Now, I don't know why they think this is a good idea. I don't, okay? They seem to believe that landlords are somehow using this information in order to hurt good tenants, and I don't think that's the case at all. In fact, what I think is happening is a lot of bad tenants are getting caught by this, and they don't like that. They don't like the fact that landlords are using the best information that they have in order to put good tenants into their properties. And they want to make it so that not the landlord, but the government has control of who you have to take in as a tenant. See, and this is my gripe, okay? These policies, when I start talking about all these landlord and tenant policies, a lot of them are very socialist, okay? They want the government to be top-down controlling every single aspect of your business, from how much you charge for rent, who you accept as a tenant, how long they live there, if you can or can't evict them. And they want you to, of course, foot the bill for all the maintenance and for all the purchase price of the property. So yeah, it seems to me that a lot of this is just a large push towards socialism. But, you be the judge, okay? Tell me what you think when you hear about these policies that make it so that the landlord doesn't even have rights over their own property, or can't even make the decision using a total amount of information. Like, information itself is not going to harm anyone, okay? It is information. The landlord will make the ultimate decision whether this person is a good tenant or not. So just as an example, a lot of the times you'll see these laws and they're like, oh, well, we want to delete the eviction history of these tenants if the eviction was not finalized. I could tell you for a fact that I have several tenants who I had filed eviction against, who the eviction never got finalized because they moved out, before I'd had to go through the full eviction process. And I was glad, but that doesn't mean that they didn't owe me money. That doesn't mean they didn't trash my property. That doesn't mean that they paid me rent on time. They were still a garbage tenant. So you know what? It would be very beneficial for the next landlord to be able to look at that history and say, hey, this person has an eviction filed against them. They might not be a great tenant. No, it didn't go all the way through. They weren't evicted, but you know what? They're a bad tenant, so I'm not going to rent to them. It might just be beneficial for a landlord to be able to do that. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think. So do you believe that landlords should have the ability to see eviction filings even when they don't lead to, a full eviction? Let's say a tenant wins the case, which is pretty rare, by the way, because most cases are for non-payment of rent. Like they bring that up in this article. Oh yeah, we should erase it if the tenant wins the case. And I'm like, the tenant didn't win. The landlord doesn't file an eviction for no reason. Okay, keep that in mind. Landlords don't file evictions for no reason. It's a huge waste of time and money for us. So why did the landlord file that eviction? Because there was some sort of issue with this tenant. Whether the tenant won the case or not is irrelevant. Okay, if there truly was a good tenant in the unit, there wouldn't have been an eviction filed against them. Anyway, let me get into the article, and we'll talk about this as we go through it. This article is coming from stateline.org, and it says, landlords cry foul as more states seal eviction records. With eviction filings leaving a lasting mark on renters' records, many states are reconsidering how much information landlords really need. We need all the information, period. I mean, anything less than that is stupid. Do you think that it's fair that we don't have access to all the information needed to make a good tenant screening decision? That would be like telling the credit card company, hey, you know what? No, you don't need their full credit report. You could just only see the debts that they didn't pay off, right? Like, no, you're going to see that, hey, this person had an outstanding debt for years and they did pay it off, but they still had that debt for years and, screwed over the person who lent them that money. So it's important. It's important for a person who is essentially a lender, because that's what I feel like a lot of the times you can compare landlords in a way to a lender, because the way our businesses are lined up, it's kind of similar in that manner. So I think that just like a lender is able to look at your full credit history before making a loan decision, we should be allowed to make a very good decision based on all the facts. Anyway, let's get into the article. When pandemic-era tenant protections expired, rents immediately soared, and eviction filings surged last year more than 50% over pre-pandemic levels in some U.S. cities. These filings can cast long shadows. Simply being named in an eviction complaint, regardless of the outcome, can severely limit future housing options and prolong housing insecurity, according to a recent University of Michigan study. And you know what? Of course eviction filings were going to shoot up like that. What did they expect? You told landlords they couldn't evict in some places for years. And then, there's all this pent-up demand for evictions, and they're going to file them all at the same time as soon as they ended those eviction moratoriums. Of course, there's going to be a lot more evictions immediately following the pandemic than there were before it. Okay, that's ridiculous to think otherwise. And when they're sitting here and they're saying, oh, well, this might hurt their ability to find housing going into the future, of course it will. That is the reason why I tell, pay your rent on time. Pay it all the time, because this will hurt if you don't. You are going to screw yourself over. It's like saying, I went to prison for 5 years for robbery, and now I'm having trouble finding a job. That's not fair. Well, yeah, it is fair. Of course you're going to have trouble finding a job with a criminal history, okay? It's the same thing for if you're a tenant and you have eviction history, okay? People look at this stuff and then they are going to make a decision. And guess what? All those people who don't have that criminal history or don't have that eviction history, they are going to get priority over you when it comes to living in a rental property. Now, you're going to be able to find some place, but it might not be high quality. It might be located in a bad part of town, and it might be with a small mom and pop landlord who doesn't do thorough tenant screening. But believe me, if you go on to screw up even more, well, it's going to be even harder. So you know what? I find it funny that they mentioned this, and I just did a story just a little while ago about this serial scamming couple up in Massachusetts, right? And so these people had multiple evictions, owed like 20 plus landlords over $100,000, and yet they were still able to keep finding housing. And you know how they were able to do it? They were able to scam small mom and pop landlords who weren't doing thorough background checks. That's part of the reason why I am so much against this stuff, right? Because they take away your ability to do a thorough background check. You wouldn't have found that those scamming tenants unless you really did a good job. So, why take away our tools? Okay, it hurts. It hurts us, and it's idiotic. The situation underscores a growing debate across the country. Should eviction records be shielded from public access to offer tenants a cleaner shot at finding another home? In recent years, more states are saying yes, at least in some cases. Eviction filings are public court records. Landlords and property owners can buy databases of the records to screen potential tenants. Property owners argue that sealing data on eviction filings, most of which are for non-payment of rent, eliminates crucial insights into rental history. Housing advocates, however, warn that any filing can unfairly block renters from future housing because the outcome may not be an eviction. Hey, I already brought up how, many cases an eviction filing doesn't lead fully to an eviction, okay? So it's absolutely ridiculous to think that that information isn't useful to a landlord. And the fact that they even are talking to housing advocates about this is ridiculous. Those people, they don't know anything about running a business. They don't know anything about finding a good tenant. And they, simply put, they believe the BS garbage that some one little anecdotal experience. So, one person over here 20 years ago got mistreated by a landlord. So now we're going to let tens of thousands of bad tenants screw landlords over. That's stupid. Okay? That's stupid. Don't fall for it. Do not fall for anything these advocates say, because you know what? Like I said before, I think they're pushing for socialism. I think they want a government takeover of housing, and they hate anybody who, uses housing to make money. That's what this country's about. Capitalism, period. Not socialism. Socialism is a failed system. And I'm railing hard against it because I've heard too much nonsense about socialism and pretty much communism coming out, in the current political climate. And it's just, it's making me mad, okay? An eviction filing doesn't provide enough information to determine a tenant's ability to honor their next lease, said Katie Fallon, a principal policy associate with the Urban Institute, a research and advocacy think tank focusing on urban policies. Given the low quality of this eviction filing data and the lack of outcomes in the filings themselves, it is a very open question of how accurate these filings are and what information they really provide to landlords, she said. Yeah, you know what? This you can tell just by listening to that she's never talked to a landlord. Never. I mean, literally never. Never asked a landlord, well, why is the eviction filing information so important to you? She is brain dead, okay? Just has this idea in her head. Oh, this is the poor victims. Everybody's a victim over here, and they're being held down by the man, the rich man who owns the property, just won't rent to them because they had this filing, and it wasn't their fault. They lost their job, and listen, lost your job is not an excuse for not paying your rent. It has nothing to do with it, in fact, right? You lost your job. That's your problem, not mine. My problem is when you owe me rent, you agreed in a contract to pay me, and you did not. So, am I going to file eviction? Absolutely. Will it always end in an eviction? No. Sometimes the tenant will voluntarily move out, admit to me that they don't have the money to pay me, don't have enough money, they don't make enough money to pay the rent, and, leave on their own. And so the eviction filing didn't go through. So, what do you think, okay? Put a comment down below. Let me know if you think it's a good idea to hide eviction records from the landlords, from the people who need it. You know what? This is a public record we're talking about. They don't hide any other public cases, just evictions. That should tell you what the politics are behind these sort of issues.